Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to our chart dive series, where we dive right into the charts of famous people and public figures you might know to see why they are the way that they are and to see the human design chart in action. Today, we're going to dive right into the chart of Luigi Mangione, the 26-year-old alleged shooter of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. But before we get into this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that like button, and hit that notification bell so that you can continue to satisfy your human design curiosities and be the first to know when we release fresh new content just like this one. For those who are new here, I'm your host, Crystal Alferrero. I'm a human design teacher and guide, and I help people like yourselves make sense of the human design system. Okay, now going back to Luigi, what I think is really interesting is that when extreme situations like this take place, the alleged murderer is normally shunned or shamed by the public, but in this case, he's been protected and celebrated quite a bit across the US. And why is that? Well, there's a number of theories, including the fact that he's not your typical profile for an alleged murderer. Physically, he's young, he's fit, he's very good looking. He was valedictorian of his graduating class in high school, graduated from an Ivy League school in engineering. He had a strong relationship with his family. He had a lot of friends, or I guess like acquaintances as well, that have come out and have said nothing but good things about him. He also comes from a wealthy background, or I guess like a wealthy socioeconomic class, right? But even beyond the physical, the socioeconomic, and the interpersonal factors, the one thing that really stood out to me the most was the movement behind it all. And again, if you're watching this video, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that this whole situation highlighted the major healthcare crisis in the US and the exploitation by healthcare insurance companies. And it brought together people. It created this sense of union because of how widespread this issue is. So whether he really had anything to do with the shooting or not, he's become the face of this movement. And rather than seeing him as an alleged murderer, he's seen almost like a national hero by strangers and even his fellow inmates who have gone on to protect him and, give him haircuts during his incarceration. So what I wanted to explore and what I wanted to look at are patterns we see in Luigi's chart and see, was he destined for destruction or is he destined to bring about a revolution? So I'm going to uncover what's coded in his human design chart, connect the dots, and share my conclusion at the end. So you're going to want to stay tuned. Just as a disclaimer, this video is strictly for educational and entertainment purposes only. Everything I share in this video are speculations based on what I see publicly available in the media and what I observe in his human design chart, which may not necessarily be a factual representation of reality, but it's nonetheless insightful. So with that said, if you're sensitive to this topic, I highly recommend not watching. But if you want to have some fun, explore some human design, let's just dive in. All right, are you ready? Let's go. So here's his birth chart, or his human design chart. He was born on May 6, 1998 in Towson, Maryland. We don't have an exact birth time, so I just used 12 p.m. and I checked the variations throughout the day. There aren't too many, but this basically makes him a 3-5 emotional manifester. And the first time I heard about this whole case, I went down the TikTok rabbit hole and I'm like, this guy has got to be a manifester. If anyone's going to be celebrated for, committing an alleged murder, it's got to be a manifester. I mean, it's definitely not going to be a projector, and it just makes a lot of sense. And lo and behold, when we pulled up his chart, he was a manifester. I did this with my reader certification students one day, and there he was. Manifestors are here to leave an impact, right? These are people who walk into a room and have command of the room, and all heads turn towards them. They have this powerful presence that just, it doesn't go unnoticed, right? You notice when a manifestor comes into the room. And manifestors are also known to be fiercely independent, very, very independent. And looking at his design, even more so, being a single definition, right? This is really interesting because in his manifesto, he claimed that he wasn't working with anyone. He went off grid for a few months as well before the alleged shooting took place, and it's common for manifestors to be secretive and, be off doing their being on their creative urge and possibly not informing others of what they're up to because they just want to be left in peace. And that's what seems to be the case, or that's what seemed to be the case. Not just that, but he's a 3-5 manifestor, right? We see right here, 3-5. And this is someone that's here to leave an impact by influencing others with his unconventional message, through his unconventional beliefs, and also maybe his practical solutions that he has. He's seen as the savior that can come in times of crisis. And also that third line, tearing down what's not working in order to bring something new that does, right? In order to discover what does. And that third line, the martyr, is also known as the anarchist, right? This is their leadership style in that way. And he leads by rebelling against what's not working, rebelling against certain structures and tearing them down in order to try something new, right? In order to try something new that leaves that impact. And as a fifth line, he's known as the general who's here to lead in times of crisis. And that's how he inspires loyalty from others, right? This is exactly what we see happening. He lives in that projection field. Everyone is projecting certain perceptions, beliefs, and, thoughts about him. And on top of that, he's an emotional manifestor. You really don't want to mess with an emotional manifestor that's been pushed to their limits. And as we know, the not self theme of manifestors is anger, right? We've definitely seen glimpses of that. And now moving on to his definition, we can see who he came here to be, right? We see this definition right here. And what I see here is that if we were to summarize him in a couple of words, but he can be summarized as this deeply emotional social being who's here to shock, uplift, and support and provide new direction for his community, right? For his community right here and those he cares about. So he has these two emotional channels, right? This is where the deeply emotional part comes from. He has those two emotional channels here. The channel of community, right? A design of a part seeking a whole, and also the channel of openness, a design of a social being, both of which are very inherently social channels. When we look at the channel of openness, this is what brings the emotional center to the throat, right? And it's a manifested channel, so he can have a very powerful impact on other people around him through his words, right? He has a very emotional form of expression. He has a very articulate way of speaking, or potentially very articulate way of speaking, which are powered by emotion. So just imagine that combination. And these are people that can either be very, again, graceful and articulate and charming, or on the flip side, antisocial, right? If they're not in the mood. It's basically a design of social openness in that gate 22, the gate of openness, when they're in the mood. So the gate 22, it's this emotional energy of being open to social interaction or not, depending on their mood, and they need to honor that. It's also activated by Jupiter. So we see gate 22 in Jupiter, and it's also in the fourth line, right? So he's someone that can have a lot of luck in his social interactions through his sensitivity and grace, right? So when we look at Jupiter, Jupiter is your personal law. Basically, his personal law is to honor his mood for social interactions and not force himself to interact when he's not in that right mood. Otherwise, again, he could probably say certain things that he might regret later, or do certain things that he regrets later, right? They can potentially be in a more reactive mode. And otherwise, again, if he's forcing, he can find himself facing a lot of resistance and maybe even find himself limited in his growth in some ways as well. Now, going up to the throat, we see that gate 12, the gate of caution, right? And it's that trait of cautious expression, or the complete opposite, right? So in extreme cases, it's completely abandoning caution. especially if he's not in the right mood and he's maybe forcing himself to interact with others. So another thing I found interesting is, I was playing around with the time. So let's say he was born a little bit later. So let's just play around with this. Again, 1 hour doesn't make a huge difference in his design, but it does change the lines, right? If he was born even 1 hour later, we see a 3-6 profile. We also see a 4th line in that gate 12. And what I found interesting about this is that line 4 in gate 12 is known as the prophet, right? We see this right here. And this goes hand in hand with, having a message, with having some kind of message to share. So he's clearly someone that has a message to share. And this would be his unconscious driving force, having that message. And interestingly, if he was born an hour later, he would be a 3-6 profile. And so if that was the case, instead of that 5th line, he would be basically living as a double 3rd line. And that is a lot of chaos, right? A lot of chaos. Anyone with a 3-6 or a 6-3 can experience a lot of change and maybe turbulence, I would say, in the first 30 years of their life, or in, every year leading up to that Saturn return. And, we could argue that maybe he was born a little bit later and that he is a 3-6, right? Imagine that. I mean, it would also make a lot of sense to me if he wasn't a 5th line, but instead was a 3-6 and was just going through that trial and error process. Because I feel like 6th lines also have a bit of, they're very wise in nature. They're here to show us embodied wisdom over time, right? They're here to mature into this role model. And it seems like this 6th line, or I guess if this was the case, that could also be part of his maturing process and part of that embodied wisdom that he's here to share with us later down the line. We don't know. So yeah, I mean, this is what we see if he was born an hour later, so at 1 instead of 12 p.m. I'm just going to leave it here for now, right? When we look at the unconscious moon in that gate 12, right, there's a part of him that is driven towards caution and driven towards restraint, right? The unconscious moon, or just the moon in general, represents that motivating force, that driving force. And so there might be a part of him that exercises that caution, exercises that restraint, and waits for the right timing. And I would even argue that he was very cautious in this whole situation, right? In the alleged shooting, he was waiting and waiting for the right timing. I mean, it was clearly not just some spontaneous thing, if that, whether or not he was part of that shooting or not, but we can see that it was not just a spontaneous thing. He had this whole 3-page manifesto written out and a lot of other things, right? I forget where I saw this. I think his Goodreads account became public, and he was reading a lot of different books on, healthcare, or I guess like on the healthcare system, how to heal his back. He had chronic back issues and back pain. There were a lot of different books that we could see led up to this point. So it wasn't just this spur of the moment decision, but it seemed like he was very cautious and just waiting for the right timing for everything to play out and for the right timing to share his message as this prophet. So we see here, he's here to develop the ability to foresee and plan for the end of standstill, the ability to foresee and express the need for social interaction and an end to caution. So just waiting for the right timing to come out and share what he's seeing, share that message, right? Now, I want to go into the channel of community. So just going a little bit further down the chart, we see the 4037, right? This is his other emotional channel. It's more tribal in nature compared to the channel of openness. It's also the gift of establishing friendship and, having this warm, what's that word? I don't know. I'm losing my words right now, but basically It's this gift of establishing friendship and being able to support and provide for his community, deliver to his community. And it's also associated, well, it has an emotional wave of being triggered by needs or bargains being met or not. So if he feels like a certain need is not being met or a certain bargain is not being met, he feels like maybe there's this unfair exchange between him and maybe another person, or even him and the insurance companies, right? This is someone that can be very, very triggered in that, get very caught up in that. It's almost like when we think of these tribal emotional waves, it's almost like a tea kettle, I don't even know how you'd call it, but a teapot that is boiling water, right? And it's just kind of slowly boiling, getting hotter. And all of a sudden, boom, it explodes, right? Until that pressure is released. And so I feel like I kind of see that in this whole situation as well. Just that slow buildup of getting sick and tired of the insurance company. Maybe he had his own issues, right? Specific issues with him. And I know he also dealt with issues with his mother as well. And so it was just that whole like buildup of feeling like their end of the bargain was not being met. Maybe they were denied so many times, and that just created this big buildup of emotion and, just him getting sick of it, right? Him at his wit's end with the insurance company. And so that emotion, that kind of explosion maybe led to that final decision of, okay, I'm going to abandon this caution now. It's the right timing. It's time to go. What we also see here with the channel of community is that this is someone with very strong community and family values. Again, we also see that through his strong relationships with his family and with a lot of the connections that he's made through his life, through his travels. His unconscious Mars here is in gate 37, line 5. And in detriment, this is called love. Let me just show you here. The quality of love, right? The natural and unaffected devotion to the family in the Ravi Ching. This is interesting because it's been said that, again, one of the major motives, again, alleged, is due to having witnessed his mother suffer for years, like I mentioned earlier, from chronic pain. He would wake up to his mother screaming in pain at night and would have to move. Again, this is all from what I've heard, but he would have to, hide out in the living room so that he could avoid listening to his mother's screams at night. And that's something that's very traumatizing to go through and to see someone that you love suffer. And that shooting, or this, alleged shooting, could have been seen as an act of love and devotion for his mother. We also see the 6th line in his south node, right? 6th line activated in his south node in gate 37. And this quality is called purpose. I wanted to highlight this because this is essentially someone that's seeking deeper meaning, right? Seeking deeper meaning and purpose of life on the material plane, seeking deeper meaning and purpose of, being a part of a community and supporting their tribe and, doing all these things for the people around him. And yeah, again, what I can also see here is him being a part of the tribe and then needing to see what else is out there, right? Needing to do something more, right? He's already part of something bigger than himself, but what is his purpose? We see this strong drive to discover that deeper meaning. I think I already exercised deeper meaning and purpose so many times, but anyways, we'll move on from that. Another thing that really caught my eye is that this channel, the channel of community, it's activated by the nodes on both the design and personality side. And one of the things that this means from a more spiritual or esoteric perspective is that this is a theme from a past life that's repeating itself, right? There's lessons that need to be learned. So it's bringing a bigger emphasis on this whole theme of community. Maybe there was something that he needed to do to support and deliver for his community in a past life that he didn't get to complete, or that maybe he's wanting to do again. But we see that repeated theme. And this is someone that community plays this huge role in his life path. And it seems like this whole movement is a form of rebellion in a way, right? It's a form of rebellion to protect and support his community. And when we talk about community, this could be his family, this could be his close friends, it could be the American people. That's something that he referred to in the manifesto, and in that clip of him, yelling at the press when he was getting transferred from jail. I don't know the technical words, but basically being transferred from one center to another, one jail from another to another. And if you've ever gone down the TikTok rabbit hole, I'm sure you have if you're watching this, but if you've ever gone down the TikTok rabbit hole or even watched interviews of people who have known him in the past, he seemed to have a lot of friends and, connections, and everyone's described him as this good, personable guy. I don't think I've heard any negative accounts of him. So it's clear that he was very community oriented and, sociable. So moving on, let me just go back here. Moving on, we'll go back to the ego center here. So obviously someone very strong-willed, that is Luigi. We see the ego going over to the G, right? It's connected to the G by this channel of initiation, right? Channel of initiation. This is a design of needing to be first. This came to me as no surprise, right? Because he's definitely initiated and shocked his fellow Americans into this, revolt, into this uprising, into this rebellion with his actions and with this whole movement. And with gate 51, my apologies. This is the gate of shock, right? This is someone that can be very unpredictable and either do shocking things and say shocking things. My husband has the channel of initiation, so I see this, right? I see this every day. And again, in his case, he's done both. He said shocking things, he's done shocking things. He's initiated this whole movement, right? He's initiated other people outside of their comfort zone to speak about issues that they faced in this whole healthcare system crisis, right? And you can actually see the theme of saying shocking things as well through his conscious Mercury, right? We see conscious Mercury is what activates that gate of shock, right? The gate 51. And it's actually also in, where is this? Let me just click here. There we go. Has the quality of symmetry, right? Perfected illumination that in grasping the nature of shock can transform its normal patterns into, blah, 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 blah. The perfection of the warrior ego through instinctive adaptation. So yeah, someone that can adapt to the shock, right? Can deal with the shock. That's what this line of symmetry is all about. We also see the egoism to indulge in victory and lose vigilance. I mean, we don't know. We can theorize. I'm sure he has a certain sense of satisfaction in this whole thing as well, right? Otherwise, I don't think he'd be doing it. But yeah, so I guess we can see both sides of that coin, right? Yeah, going back to this fifth line, right? This whole gate of shock and having that resistance to dealing with shock, right? This kind of like, I don't know if you can call it a shield, whatever you want to call it. He just, for someone that is going through this whole thing and is almost, is in this whole process of potentially being convicted, right? He seems so calm and nonchalant about everything. And he seems very confident. And, whenever we see him in clips or in these public hearings, he just seems so, relaxed. He's almost like resistant to this shock, or maybe he knew what to anticipate. He knew this was all part of it. So he's not surprised at all. And he looks almost very stoic, right? Like undisturbed, basically, with this whole process. And again, these are people that can also have very shocking experiences in their life happen to them, experiences that test them as well. And I feel like this is all part of his journey with his health, and also witnessing his mother's conditions as a whole part of that. And all of that kind of shocked him awake, right? He also has his unconscious Saturn in gate 51. So that was a big one as well. Here we go. So gate 51, line 1, activated by Saturn. These are also, when we think of Saturn, Saturn is the teacher, right? Saturn is going to give us shocking lessons here, right? With the gate 51. And the first line is in detriment. So I'm just going to click this here. We see first of all, quality of reference, a tendency to emotional withdrawal after a shock, the weakness of the ego in times of challenge. And it did look like there was this pattern of withdrawal when things got tough. He, I think, traveled and moved. He actually moved to Hawaii, I believe, to deal with his back pain, or like to find a new way to deal with his back pain. He also went off social media for a couple months after he got laid off. He basically went off grid for a couple of months as well before this shooting took place. And, as a third line, again, he's someone that has built this resiliency. He's almost like, okay, chaos, whatever. I've been there. I've done that. Maybe he's still building that resiliency as well. But again, we see him very calm and collected. And what we can also see is that even though he might have withdrawn emotionally, maybe withdrawn from people, it wasn't spent sulking. It didn't seem to be spent like in victim mode or anything like that. These times of isolation, I would say, were spent searching for solutions, right? Searching for answers, searching for something different, right? He was educating himself. Now, with gate 25 on the other side in the G center, right? This is the gate of spirit of self, right? This is also what's associated with universal love. And it's all about surrendering to your higher self. So for these people, withdrawal away from people is actually very good for them so that they can connect back to themselves. They can connect back to his innocence, to, his higher self. And I guess despite all of the shocking things that he might encounter, or, shocking events that test him throughout his life. And so, 25, one of the biggest challenges that they have is to maintain that innocence, maintain that spirit, stay connected to their higher self, regardless of the obstacles that life throws their way. And so, one of the qualities of this channel is kind of like this playful competitiveness. And so we see him as being a really big team player. He's someone that's always wanting to like uplift people and, push people outside of their comfort zone, push people into greater heights that they might not have gone on their own. And again, we've seen this with what's happened, and he's pushed people to, speak out about their experiences that they've had and fight for more, right? And demand a change. Now, we're in the G center, right? And I want to talk about this here because his incarnation cross, let me just go back here. His incarnation cross is the cross of the Sphinx, and the cross of the Sphinx includes the 4 direction gates, right? The 4 direction gates are in the G center. You see here, his Sun and Earth, 2, 1, 13, and 7, again, all in the G center. And what we see here is that with his conscious Sun in gate 2 is the gate of direction. This is someone who's here to lead the way, lead the direction. This is a very much a visionary energy, and someone that's also going to point out a direction for humanity, being on the cross of the Sphinx, right? The Sphinx is symbolic for direction. And with the third line here, he's someone that's going to experience a lot of trial and error and discovering the right direction for himself that leads to change, or also, in finding the right direction that's going to work for him. And ultimately, he leads other people, right? Shows a new way by finding his own direction in life and becoming an example of what it is that he believes and what it is that he values, what it is that he wants to live out. It empowers other people to do the same for themselves. And again, assuming, let's say in this case, he's a 3-6, right? that's exactly, I mean, it goes hand in hand with what the 3-6 is here to do. The 6 lines are here to be an embodiment of what it means to live and be authentic. And so it's all about finding his own authentic direction in life and showing us a new way of living, showing us a new way that we can move towards. And so we also saw this pattern in Luigi in terms of direction and all these different changes. He's someone that's moved between jobs, he's traveled, he's lived in Hawaii, he's also lived in Japan. What we see here, let me just click on this. Okay, so third line, we see the quality of patience, right? Or the lack of patience. It's two sides of the same coin. So in the Rei Ching, it's either the maturity, where do we see this? To accept that the process never ends, and a higher knowing that cannot wait and demands expression, which for me shows the potential impatience and impulsivity, right? In experimenting with new directions. We've seen that, jumping from place to place and different things. And he's also 26 and he's also pre-Saturn return. So actually his Saturn enters, he's just about to start his Saturn return. It enters Aries this year in 2025. And so all these changes are being very much amplified at this time, and they're all happening to him, happening for him to form him into the person that he's becoming, right? And I think looking back at his design, again, what we see here, someone that is a social being that's here to serve and provide for their community and also lift up his community, right? Push them out of their comfort zone, bring them into new direction, initiate new directions with this Sphinx. And what can hold him back from this, or what can create distractions and challenges in his life on this path of providing direction and, really being a leader in a sense, right? Being this manifester. What I see is learning to navigate that patience, especially with that gate 2, based on what we see, right? There's that theme of patience that seems to be something, that thread that's really, I'm going to say, the big dilemma in his chart. And especially, again, in this double third line stage, if he's a 3-6, patience is definitely one of the lifelong themes he's here to develop. And he can also be challenged through the combination of his open pressure centers, right? We see here, open head, completely open head, open root. And this is someone that can maybe feel a lot of pressure to progress, right? A lot of pressure to progress along with his defined ego as well. And emotional manifested design. So, there's a lot of external pressure to think about things that don't matter, a lot of external pressure to maybe do things, take action, act on his ambitions, support, provide for needs, create mutation, overcome limitations, and live out his fantasies and his desires, right? Experience new experiences. But that pressure, again, it can create a lot of maybe overwhelm. It can create a lot of what we also see here, impatience. And that alongside with the defined ego, very much like go energy, or just like very strong, potent sprinter energy, right? Along in the emotional center. And so we see this inherent battle between wanting to push forward and move fast. He's a manifester, right? And all at the same time, remember, he's an emotional authority. So the key to finding peace and the key to living in a state of peace and being in a state of peace is to wait for clarity before pulling the trigger, pun intended. But yeah, we see like this whole theme, this pressure sandwich, motor energy, wanting to push him forward, move fast, but in order to make sure he's doing the right things for himself and he experiences the peace that he ultimately wants to experience, it's really important for him to wait for clarity first. So what we also see here in his gate 2 in the third line, so let me just go back here. I don't think I pointed this out, but it says, for the revolutionary in the detriment of position, for the revolutionary, patience is a vice. So patience, huge theme. So now that we've looked at his chart, let's go back to that initial question. is Luigi Mangione destined for destruction or revolution? What I do know is that he's designed and destined to make an impact. And as a 3-5 emotional manifester, he's a martyr, an anarchist. He'll tear things down if he needs to in order to be heard, in order to create change. And especially with his nodes in that channel of community, he's someone that's willing to sacrifice himself for a greater cause, for the whole, and create this revolution to support the tribe. So right there, we see the potential to leave his impact by creating a revolution, even if it's in a more destructive way. So my answer is that he's here to leave an impact by initiating some kind of revolution, and he's definitely capable of destruction, again, allegedly, but he's still young and he's still here to learn about patience and learn how to focus his energy on what truly matters, and focus on directions that are going to be more beneficial and in alignment to him. I personally think he has a really good head on his shoulders. He seems to have a really good support system, so we'll really only know over time how things unravel. So that's it for today's video, and if you want to learn how to read and analyze the human design chart, and you want to add it to your skill set as a coach or service provider, or even start a career in human design, this is exactly what I teach my students to do inside the Human Design Reader Certification Program. We go beyond the information you're learning about on this channel, and we help you actually build the confidence and the skills to analyze, synthesize, apply, and deliver human design in the most empowering way possible. So if this feels aligned and correct for you, I invite you to click the link in the description to learn more, or even enroll today and you can get started right away. Anyways, that's all for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this one just as much as I did. So please let me know down in the comments if you have any other observations or insights about Luigi's chart. I'd love to hear them. And if you like these types of videos and you want to see more of them, I'd be so grateful if you could let me know by hitting that like button and hitting subscribe so you can see more just like this. So with that said, hope you have an amazing rest of your day or evening wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.